Let's talk about chip stocks. They really led the sell-off in the NASDAQ yesterday. Looking at the SMH in the third quarter, since the start of July, down about 2.5%. Should investors be concerned?
Well, there's a combination of trends going on, Frank. One of them is clearly concern over politics, and some of that relates to disruption around the geopolitical situation and where chip stocks are based. So, for example, we had some very strong results this morning from TSMC, which we'll maybe talk about, but certainly from the point of view of concerns over the Trump administration, the potential Trump administration, that's something which is weighing on the names. And also, there'd been a high degree of concentration around AI-related names in the market, which has created a vulnerability for a sell-off. But I think at the stage that this has happened, it's probably healthy. There have been a number of catalysts which have caused this, and I think if this goes on for too much longer, it will represent a buying opportunity.
All right, so you're seeing a buying opportunity if the sell-off or some of the volatility continues. We've been doing a lot of talk about rotation here in the United States. Some money moving into things like small caps, transports in recent days. But then again, we have mega cap tech earnings coming up next week. Speaking to a lot of traders, they believe that some of this volatility, some of this money moving around, it's going to actually move back into mega cap tech ahead of earnings. Do you agree? Do you see investors putting their faith back in mega cap tech starting next week?
I think it's possible, but it's going to be really important that not only the backward-looking aspect of the statements are solid, such as the recent revenue and earning trends, of course, but also that forward guidance is firm, and that is something that investors will be really looking at very closely. And valuations, let's not forget, have become quite bifurcated within the sector between much lower valuations and lower multiples for those kind of names related more to traditional chip activities such as smartphones and PCs, and much higher multiples on those related to AI. So I think there will be some discernment between individual names, but there is a chance, certainly if the outlook is strong, that those stocks can bounce back quite strongly, yes.
You know, speaking of earnings, we got earnings from Taiwan Semi. They're getting a boost in the pre-market right now. The company, also the world's largest chip maker, rising more than 40% from a year ago with AI demand surging. Is this, in your mind, is this possibly a sign of what's going to happen going forward? I know we just talked about mega cap tech earnings, but I want to turn back to chips. If chips come up with solid earnings, does this volatility just end?
Well, I think that the volatility is here to stay for a period of time now, not only because the market had become so skewed towards a very small number of names at the large end of the scale, particularly in the US, but also as the political noise starts to become increasingly dominant, and certainly with the announcement of J.D. Vance as the running mate for Trump, that adds a kind of, if you like, intellectual form to the Trump project, which will get investors thinking about how the outlook will look for the several years now as under a potential Republican administration. I think looking at TSMC, I think that's a real good case in point, because the numbers that we've just seen this morning are very strong, both in terms of revenue guidance, in terms of margin, and in terms of outlook. But nonetheless, there is still the ongoing geopolitical overhang, not least added to by the comments that Trump made yesterday around Taiwan. So I think there are a number of issues for investors to think about, and that may well be reflected in valuations when it comes to stocks such as TSMC relative to some of its peers.
So, Paul, it sounds like you're saying that the risk, and here at least on the U.S. side, the election variables here, they just haven't quite been priced in yet.
I think that's something which investors will continue to think about. There is a very strong temptation for investors, I think, which we've been seeing with the rally from the Russell over the last week or so and some of the sell-off in tech, to move towards some of those more traditional industries, which, if you recall, did very well the last time that Trump won the election in 2016. And those tend to be old economy style stocks, it tends to be financials, it tends to be metal bending style industries such as industrials, and maybe some of the energy stocks as well, which should benefit from a more favorable treatment under that kind of administration. So again, I think that the one-way traffic that we'd seen to some extent year to date is unlikely to continue, but I think the underlying fundamentals for the tech space, but particularly the semiconductor space, remain very much in place.